So the first thing I'll kick off with is, who do we have on the call today? So first myself, my name's Stuart, as I said, the secretary to our operations committee, and I've been in and around the energy industry for about 37 years now, in a combination of roles in both retail, but predominantly in trading. Our two speakers, who for their own slots, I'm sure will do their own introductions, but let me just flatter them to begin with, because we've got some great speakers today. The first person up is Richard Asquith. He started his international career in the Big Four, working for KPMG and Ernst & Young across Europe. He established and built the European VAT businesses of Avalara and the TMF Group. He launched VATlive.com, which is, I'm assured, the leading global indirect tax website with over 1 million regular users, and he is now CEO of VATCalc. Richard is a winner of International Tax Review's Tax Innovator of the Year. So I'm could not be more delighted that he's on the call to talk to us this afternoon. Our second speaker is Steve Graham. Steve who is from OpenPeppol, has a wide consultancy experience. He held multiple director level positions in the public and private sector, and is now head of business at OpenPeppol, where he looks after business development, market development, communications, and Peppol Authority onboarding. Steve worked at the Department of Health in the UK, where he developed the National Health Service e-procurement strategy and led the award-winning NHS Scan for Safety programme. So those are your speakers this afternoon. First of all, though, let me take you through the agenda. I will begin the call by explaining why VAT in the digital age is so important for energy trading operations. I will then hand the floor over to Richard to begin with, to talk about ViDA and all aspects of that, including how it relates to e-invoicing. And then over to Steve to talk about the role of OpenPeppol and what OpenPeppol are doing to prepare for ViDA. If you have questions during the call this afternoon, please post those in the chat. We will attempt to answer some on the call, particularly those that are directed at the guest speakers, and we'll follow up on any of the questions we don't get to this afternoon as soon as possible. So let me first of all, though, start off with how come a operations group within Energy Traders Europe are running this call this afternoon. On the face of it, VAT in the digital age and e-invoicing would be more of a tax and finance department topic of interest. But the reason for doing that is that we believe that operationally those initiatives have a major impact on trading operations, particularly because energy trading is so international. Secondly, that the exchange of electronic structured data for settlement, which is something we've been championing for many years, becomes mandatory under these regulations. Thirdly, that although it's not directly implied by the legislation, we believe that the pressure to make settlement faster, again, something we've been pushing for the past few years, will increase. But also one of the questions I receive on this from time to time as well, is this just a European Union thing? And as I think Richard in particular will make clear, but Steve can talk to this too, I'm sure, this is not just a European Union thing. It impacts countries all around the world. So why energy traders are interested in this, though? Well, the operations team here is responsible for managing and maintaining, along with our members, a series of standards for energy trading operations across Europe. And in particular, this legislation impacts on our electronic settlement matching standard. That standard already provides electronic invoicing, as well as some additional value through matching and netting. And so when we became aware of the forthcoming changes, we realised that we needed to do something to keep in step with that. So what are we doing about that? Well, the first big piece and our priority is to work with OpenPeppol, and we're working very closely with Stephen and his colleagues to ensure that that electronic settlement matching standard is compliant with e-invoicing, so that if you're currently using it, you can be certain that it will work in the future and that you'll carry on getting the benefits of matching and netting. And we continue to promote that standard as a higher value option for energy traders, more than just e-invoicing. That is not the topic of this afternoon. If you want to hear more about that, there's a video on our website, which I would direct you to. What else are we doing? Now, we are not a service provider at Energy Traders Europe, but there are two service providers that we're aware of, at least. That's Fidectus and Equias, whose logos you can see here. And we are encouraging those two service providers to come with us in changing the electronic settlement matching standard to meet the new requirements for e-invoicing. And we continue to push for doing things faster. Some of you may be aware that a few years ago we worked with PwC to produce a report on faster settlement, and that is available through our website. So this is very central to everything that we're doing in operations. So having explained why it's a call from us to talk about this topic, I will now hand over to Richard, who hopefully can introduce himself and also take over the slide presentation. Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stuart, and for those kind words. I think only my mum talks as highly of me as you did, so that was very gracious of you, and I didn't even send you a card yesterday. Hello, everybody. I recognise quite a few names that are popping up there, so it's good to see some old friends and lots of new ones talking about what is truly it's difficult to understate the importance of what's coming at us in Europe with now that ViDA has been adopted. It was adopted formally a couple of weeks ago and now being gazetted or published, which means it's ready to be implemented. And I'll be taking you through some of that. I've got a presentation if I'm allowed to share. Sorry, that was the wrong one. Another go. Me and technology, nothing can go ever wrong. Here we go. Hopefully now you can all see my slides. Yeah, good. Right, so as I say, I'm going to give you some highlights on ViDA. Now, I've only got around about 20 minutes, so I've only just picked out some of the interesting pieces, but primarily focusing on e-invoicing and thinking about this audience. There's two big requirements coming. It's the process and the requirements on architecture and IT that is the big one to satisfy the requirements. But the other one is, and it's people forget this, it's really interesting why we're here. We're here to report taxable transactions sooner and quicker and in a more automated way. And that's going to mean a big shift in business trading and settlement, some of the things that Stuart just talked about. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that. However, to get us really into the mood, I do have a special treat. Hopefully none of you have got me on open speaker in a cafe or restaurant, because there's going to be a bit of a shock coming. But I just wanted to get you into the mood first. Very good. Well, obviously, that is absolutely not a forecast of what's really going to happen to all of your live transaction data. I'm totally convinced the tax authorities will do a phenomenal job with this overwhelming avalanche of information that's coming out to them, using clever technologies to identify fraud, which is why we're all here. Right, let's crack on. A bit of a summary of what ViDA is, because everybody tends to think about ViDA being only e-invoicing. But there are actually three pillars to e-invoicing, oddly named in reverse chronological order. So the one we're going to focus on most, digital reporting requirements, which includes e-invoicing. That's 5 years off. There's an intermittent one, which is all about Airbnb and all the similar ride sharing and home sharing platforms, essentially putting the VAT obligations onto them. So not too much of important to us in our professional lives. And then the third one, which is the one that comes soonest, which is in July, that's an extension of the single VAT registration, OS, one-stop shop, which we will look at. Now, where are we up to on the timetable? Well, hooray, fanfare, it comes into effect. All the legal hurdles are now cleared, comes into effect in just over 14 days, 15 days or so. And at the moment, all the implementation papers, guidance, directive changes are being circulated around the member states. If you follow us at VATCalc on our blog, you'll see we've got lots of analysis of what they look like at the moment. Huge amount of questions outstanding, unbelievable pages and pages. Then also, I think on the 14th, there is a Fiscalis workshop where they'll be talking about some of these issues to be resolved. So I expect towards the summer, we'll see the first answers to some of the big questions we have around, particularly the e-invoicing side. I think Steve's talking about this. There's a ViDA pilot going on, so I won't steal his thunder. And likewise, I think he'll probably talk about this. The underlying e-invoicing standard that we're all going in towards 16931, very memorable, worth a tattoo if you're considering that as a middle-aged life crisis, combining it with professional needs. Then that is being adjusted now. It's just suited for B2G at the moment, but they're going to start adjusting it for B2B. Right. And just as an aside, those of you that have to track iOS, some of those reforms, they're included in ViDA, but mostly have been moved off into the customs package for 2028. Now, before I get into e-invoicing, there's two changes I was thinking about for this audience, which I'll highlight so you can keep an eye out. They're contained within Pillar 3, the single VAT registration. So firstly, any of you that use call-off stock, that's stock transferred over to the premises or to third-party warehouses prior to being sold on to a local customer. And there's some simplifications around VAT. That's being removed, as you see, from July 2028, which is when Pillar 3, single VAT registration, comes into effect. So worth thinking about that. You will be able to use the one-stop shop single return, which has been in place for a few years now, since 2021. So really very useful simplification there. And then secondly, related, again, around goods, those of you who are affected by who are non-resident buyers or sellers of goods in an EU member state, there's very complex rules about whether the reverse charge applies. Every country's free to do fairly much what they like. They are being harmonized again, July 2028. So it's a really important good simplification. What it means is less VAT registrations, hopefully for most of us. And very complicated changes, not simple as we all hoped, but basically, if you're familiar with these things, then it's the Spanish model that we're following. Okay, now moving on to e-invoicing. Why are we here? What is the Commission and the member states looking to achieve? Well, as you all know, it's all about VAT fraud. That's what's driving it. A few years ago, the Italians got a Brazilian, which is less fun than it sounds. What happened was Italy imposed SDI e-invoicing, very rigid regime, copying places like Brazil and Mexico. Hugely successful. The Italians bragged that they're saving 4 billion euros a year in missing VAT, or they've recouped it now. Based on that, everybody is off and running. And this slide here is just to give you a flavour of some of the mandates that have been announced and that are in progress over the next few years. And obviously, we see over there on the far right, ViDA coming in. Platform 1 coming in July 2030, and it's absolutely not just a European phenomenon. It started in South America, but here's just give you a flavour of some of the other countries that are in the middle. And this slide, which did about 2 days ago, is already out of date. Angola has popped up in 2025, and the problem with this is everybody's got slightly a different regime, different reporting requirements, different schemas, different information. So it's very difficult for businesses such as yourselves to comply and have problems with interoperability or reusability of your technology. So what the EU is trying to do is set a standard which increasingly a lot of the rest of the world will start to follow around e-invoicing. Now, just on the timetable, there's a risk that there's a major mistake, if I can call it that, on this timetable. As some of you will have already heard, France is debating a 1-year delay, and that's arisen in the General Assembly. Those of you that obsessively track these things, like I do, as a way to avoid having to talk to your kids in the house, then you'll know that there is an outside chance of a 1-year delay up to September 2027. Okay, now let's go through ViDA. What are the important changes in terms of e-invoicing and reporting? So the first change that comes in on that date, 14th of April, is member states have lots of new freedoms now to impose their domestic versions of e-invoicing. What they must do is they must conform to the new ViDA standard if they were not approved already by the European Commission back in January 2024. So confusingly, what that means is Italy, which has already implemented quite a draconian pre-clearance model, that can continue. France and Poland, which have already had their regimes approved by the Commission but haven't launched, they may continue as well because they were pre-January 2024 approvals. So and then what happens is under ViDA 2035, those countries must harmonise back to the ViDA regime. So we're going to have lots and lots of different variations domestically across Europe, and then some of them will extend out into 2035. Those ones already in place. Okay. So I'm going to take you through what the reporting requirements are going to look like. What the Commission and the member states have followed is a 5-corner model, which Steve's going to talk about in detail, but I'll just give a bit of context around what the EU is envisaging. So if we imagine the journey of an invoice, obviously the supplier makes a sale to their counterparty, their acquirer or their customer, and then they must produce an e-invoice, which I think Steve talks about the requirements. That's a structured electronic invoice. It's not a paper invoice, not a PDF invoice. It must be something that 2 computers can exchange with each other and be able to read. Then what happens then is that e-invoice must be transmitted to the buyer, to the customer of our supplier. And as I mentioned, that's got to follow the EU VAT directive on electronic invoicing standard 16931. Now, and it must be done within 10 days. And I'm going to come back to that point in a minute. That's transmitted to the buyer, to their accounting system or their e-invoicing service provider. It doesn't have to be direct. And then the transaction data goes to the buyer. So there's our 1, 2, 3, 4 corners. And what the Commission has done to go to a 5 is firstly, the supplier, either directly from their e-invoicing system or from if they're using a service provider, must send a summary of, and this is the digital reporting requirement, header level detail within 10 days of the supply to their national tax authority. Now, and this is where it gets complicated because we love complexity. Potentially, the buyer will have to do the same. So the buyer will have to report their purchase based on the invoice that the supplier has sent to them. And why it's complex is because it was a last-minute concession in the settlement of ViDA. Member states may opt out of imposing this obligation. So from day one, buyers should be reporting their purchase to their tax authorities unless their particular tax authority opts out of this. And there's a shorter reporting timetable for that report. And then what happens, so that's our 5th corner. There are 2 parties in there, the 2 national tax authorities, one of our supplier, one of our buyer. What they must then do is forward that data to a new centralized database, a VIS database that will be commissioned and run by the European Commission. Now, what we don't know is this lower half of this diagram, how that's going to work. That's down to the 27 member states to set up the processes and the syntax, etc. For that, and obviously it's got to follow the overarching requirements of ViDA. So there you go, 27 member states setting up their own processes for accepting digital reporting requirements. I foresee no problems at all with that. Okay. Yes, now this is, I'm getting towards the end, just got a couple more slides now. One thing I wanted to highlight is, which is very concerning, and obviously within the context of what the work that Energy Traders does with you, is these reporting, the change in reporting deadlines. So as I mentioned, what changes is post 1st of July 2030, electronic invoices, structured e-invoices must be submitted to your customer and e-reported to your tax authorities within 10 days of the chargeable event. So chargeable event, and obviously, sorry, I should have mentioned this, this is only on intra-community supply. So that's the sales of goods and services, B2B, across an internal EU border. So Germany to France, but not Germany to UK, for example, because obviously that's an export. So this is a major change, the change of the 10 to 10 days. Chargeable event or tax point. Countries have slight variations on how to define a chargeable event, and what we're needing, I mentioned there's a lot of work going on with the Fiscalis workshop, is a clear definition of that. But typically, chargeable event is the earliest of the date you would send out an invoice, the date the supply is made, so maybe the goods are delivered or the service is largely supplied, or payment. So that can be full payment or it can be an advanced payment. That typically is the guidance you use for determining the tax point. So what does that mean? And this is, remember, I keep saying it's a change in technology and reporting, but it's a change in reporting dates as well. So if we imagine where we are today, say a supply of goods is made mid-July, mid-month, then an invoice is due by the latest under the current rules on an intra-community supply by the 15th of the following month. So potentially you've got 30 days there. And obviously if the supply is made even earlier, then that can be a larger time span. And this is what changes. That invoice reporting date now must be, or the creation, the issuance of an e-invoice now shrinks down to 10 days, as you saw with that nice graphic there, which took me about 45 minutes to get right in PowerPoint. So I hope you're highly appreciative of my efforts there. So that's quite a dramatic change there for you to think about within the context of industry standardized reconciliation. And of course, as I mentioned, the customer has a further 5 days from the 25th to report this transaction to their to their member state if the member state hasn't opted out. Okay. The good news is, one of the reasons we're doing all of this is we're bringing an end to the ESL EC sales listing. That's a monthly reporting of intra-community sales and acquisitions of goods or services. Okay. Just very briefly, I'm just going to get a word in what our interest is. And this is interesting because I'm fascinated by the lack of conversation on this topic. So obviously businesses are required to send sales invoices and receive purchase invoices, whether it's in ViDA or whether it's in the local national domestic regimes that you'll know about, Belgium next year, France potentially next year, maybe potentially the year after. Then the conversations we notice people don't talk about is VAT, because if your VAT is wrong here, good chance the tax authorities will find out before you do. If it's a purchase invoice or a sales invoice, perhaps because of counterparty reporting. So the world we occupy, and I think it's interesting listening to tax people, they're beginning to wake up to this in invoicing, is was the VAT right on the sales invoice that you're issuing? Does your tax engine get it correct? And then more troublesome is the purchase side. Are you being charged the right VAT before you counter report it? Any problems in getting those right will likely trigger tax questions or audits in near real time because of those tight deadlines that we've seen. And then the second part of the problem, the VAT gulf that e-invoicing is throwing up, is you'll now be reporting your VAT twice. You'll be reporting in an electronic invoice or digital reporting to the tax authorities, but you still have to do a VAT return. So the big worry we see with people as ViDA starts to approach us is that reconciliation issue between the e-invoice and the amount that ended up in the VAT statement, VAT return. So that's something that's my livelihood. We provide technology which does both simultaneously. Good. I whisked through that and I just about made it in my 20 minutes and sandwiched in a couple of bad jokes as well, which is key KPI. But I'm going to hand back now to Stuart. I think if that's okay.
Richard, great job. Thank you very much indeed. There's certainly a lot there to Great, Stephen. Without further ado, are you ready to begin your section of the presentation, please?
I thought I was. My screen sharing seems to be problematic.
Would you like me? I'll give you a second. Otherwise, I can go.
It might be better for you to go. Otherwise, I could be messing around. Sorry about that.
There's no problem at all. So,
new laptop, or relatively new laptop. Technology is always going to get you somewhere, isn't it?
Lovely. There you go.
Okay.
The floor is yours. Please just say next slide as you require it. I will go on mute.
Sure. So thanks very much. Just initially start off talking about PeppolPol, just so you're aware of what we are all about. Then a little section on the architecture of how PeppolPol works, and then some discussion on the PeppolPol ViDA pilot that was mentioned earlier. So next slide. So you hear the two different terms, PeppolPol and OpenPeppol. So just to clarify the difference between the two, PeppolPol is what we do, OpenPeppol is who we are. PeppolPol is a global ecosystem for the exchange of electronic invoices, and actually more importantly, perhaps, other business documents as well. So it's not just invoices, you can send potentially any kind of business document across the PeppolPol network. And we do have a number of standards in place for different things like purchase orders and logistics documents and so on. So not just invoices, but obviously that's probably the biggest and biggest and most important part of what we do. And then OpenPeppol is who we are, so a international non-for-profit association based in Brussels, members from 41 countries around the world, and originally formed out of an EU-funded large-scale pilot in 2008. So next slide. So in terms of our stakeholders, we have three different primary stakeholders. So there are the end users, the businesses that buying and selling, sending and receiving business documents. Important to note that end users are not required to be members of Peppol to be able to send business documents through the Peppol network. They use this a service provider. So that's the next category in the middle. So service providers are members of Peppol and are certified by us, and they provide the process interoperability between end users. They all provide access points, so that means that they're able to access the Peppol network, but they also provide addressing and capability lookup services, which is an important feature that makes the network function, which I'll talk a bit more about in the architecture section. And then we have Peppol authorities, and these are policy enablers, government organisations that drive the adoption of Peppol in their jurisdiction. So all our government departments or agencies, we have 20. It can be that they're not absolutely required to be a government agency, although we very much encourage that. And as I say, they all are at the moment. Next slide, please. So three pillars that make this all work. So, and probably starting with the most important bit, really, which is one that people often don't think too much about, but governance across the network is really important. So to make that work, we have legal agreements, policies and procedures that exist between the different stakeholders. So for example, we have a Peppol agreement, Peppol authority agreement, so that's between OpenPeppol and each individual Peppol authority. And that's a legal agreement that sets out, what both sides have to deliver. But then in turn, the Peppol authorities hold a legal agreement, service provider agreement with the service providers that are in their jurisdiction. And if there are service providers that are in a jurisdiction that doesn't have a Peppol authority, then they are governed by an agreement with OpenPeppol directly. And these agreements define the rules under which activity is undertaken. And if people don't follow the rules, then we have a mechanism to address that. So compliance is very much a key element of delivering governance. We then have the network. So the architecture has a four-corner model, and with the tax reporting requirements, then it becomes a five-corner model. And we'll come on to that in the next section. And this architecture enables the Peppol certified service providers to send and receive documents through the network. We then have specifications, so the payload, as we call it, the specification for any given business document, so an invoice, and that provides all the detail at a technical level, enables those documents to be exchanged electronically from system to system. Okay, next slide. The key stats, 20 countries I mentioned with Peppol authorities, 41 countries with OpenPeppol members. The centre for us is Europe, but we have quite a lot of activity particularly in Asia Pacific. 692 members altogether, majority are service providers, and we have, at the last count a few weeks ago, 1.6 million organisations registered in the network to receive Peppol messages. So these are the end users that are connected into the network. That doesn't include any of Belgium. We count them separately because Belgium registered every business they have in the Peppol network, whether they send in the Peppol network or not. This number is growing rapidly. It's now in this stage of evolution of the hockey stick. If you look at the numbers, the the graph is accelerating really quickly now. Okay, next slide. This is what it looks around the world. I presume we're sharing the slides afterwards, so you can then have a look at these different countries at your leisure. The dark colours indicate countries that have a PEPL authority, and the not so dark blue is countries that have PEPL members but not a PEPL authority. So you have to be careful how you interpret this. So we have, for example, the USA is all coloured in. I think we have 6 members in the USA, so it's not massively adopted in the USA, but we should show this to indicate where we have members. Okay, next slide. So PEPL architecture, next slide. And we talked about the 4-corner model. So just a slightly different variation on the presentation you saw earlier from Richard. So we have 4 corners. Corner 1 is the supplier sending an invoice. Corner 2 is a service provider who is acting on behalf of that supplier. And then corner 3 is the service provider acting on behalf of corner 4 being the buyer. So you can see the flow of an invoice. Important to recognise that there's kind of 2 columns differentiated by the colour. So we have the non-standardised part on the left, and then the PEPL standardised part in the darker blue. And the reason for making an issue out of that is that it's very important to understand that you don't have to, as a buyer or a seller, to actually even worry about what setup you have. Slide's gone a bit weird, Stuart. Thank you. So you can have your own system. It can be a bit of paper, it could be an Excel file, it could be a properly developed piece of software, and it could be capable of being PEPL native. But whatever it is, you are sending an invoice in some form or another to a service provider. That service provider will then convert it into a PEPL message. They validate that message using the validation tools that we provide, and then they send it to corner 3, who is then able to receive that and to route it through to their customer. And again, they don't have to have any particular systems. The service provider will take care of that routing and convert it into whatever is required by the buyer. The dark blue parts are addressing and capability lookup, and this is really it's a dynamic discovery process. So when corner 2 receives the message, they need to know which service provider to send it to, and they need to know that the receiver, the corner 4, is capable of receiving that message. So they've said that they are, they've indicated through their service provider, through this dynamic process, they've indicated that they are ready, willing and able to receive that message. And so that lookup part is really crucial to make sure the whole thing functions. And it means that as a supplier, you only need one service provider to reach all of your customers. And as a buyer, you only need one service provider to receive messages from your suppliers. And of course, people switch roles. So if you're sending a purchase order, the buyer becomes the sender, becomes corner 1. So there's a switch around depending on the nature of the message that's being sent. Hopefully that's clear. Next slide. So then, simple to me, hopefully it's readily recognisable in the diagram, but what you're seeing here is the same diagram as before, but extended with the addition of a corner 5. And the corner 5 would be a single service provider acting on behalf of the tax administration, which we show at corner 6. And again, corner 5 is within the PEPL network, conforms to all of the rules and governance arrangements in PEPL, and receives from corner 2 a copy of the invoice potentially, or an extract of the invoice, which is the tax data that's required by the tax administration. So corner 2 creates that tax data document and sends it to corner 5. And then optionally, as mentioned by Richard, the corner 3 can then produce an equivalent or a confirmation message that goes through to corner 5 as well if it's required by the tax administration. And that gives a closing of the loop for that particular transaction. You get the confirmation from both sides. And then corner 5 then transmits that data into the data lake of the tax administration, where the tax administration is able then to analyse and process that data. So that's the 5-corner model. 6 if you add the tax administration. If we go to the next slide, you can get to a 9-corner model if you try hard enough. But what we have here is we've just shown the supplier in country A and the buyer in country B. PEPPOL service providers can be anywhere. It doesn't matter where they are located. And you see a corner 5 in country A and a corner 5 in country B, and then the tax administration in country A and country B. And simply you can then see the flow of the tax data. I haven't put it on here, but they come together and this is where the potential 9th corner becomes visible, is the EU VIES system. So C6 in both A and B would send information through to the European system to allow that to be matched up at that level. So the capability addressing service dynamic discovery still sits in there, and that enables corner 2 to find corner 5 and corner 3 to find corner 5 and make sure that's routed correctly. Okay, next slide. So PEPPOL ViDA pilot is something that we're working on with, if you go to the next slide. I'll come on to who we're working with, but the pilot's expected outcomes are to demonstrate that the PEPPOL interoperability framework can provide the requirements of ViDA on an intra-community basis and on an extra-community. So France to UK, for example, as well as within the EU. And also to demonstrate that a subset of the PEPPOL format can meet the ViDA requirements for digital reporting and also meet national requirements, as they may be different, because each individual country can implement its own national scheme, and to demonstrate that the PEPPOL network can meet the requirements for cross-border, can meet the national eInvoicing and reporting requirements, and can complement the existing implementations. So as Richard mentioned, the Italy, Poland, France, others set up. So we want to be able to show that we can complement that. And of course, in the end, by 2035, those countries will have to converge to the one approach in ViDA. But in the meantime, they can still adopt PEPPOL. And we want to show that through the pilot. So next slide. So in terms of who's participating, we have 18 tax administrations who, excuse me, we have a split in the columns. You can see active and reference groups. So we have a number of tax administrations that are active. So they're very closely involved with the work. And then there are a number that are in the reference group. So they're acting as observers, keeping an eye on the progress. And they are enabled to contribute to review documents and so on. They see all that information. So they're involved, but not necessarily that actively involved. Having said that, we've got a workshop with 11 countries tomorrow. So even though there's only 7 said that they're active, there's already 4 that are more active by simply coming to our workshop tomorrow. We have some government departments that are not tax administrations, and then we have service providers, and we have some end users. At this stage, we're not ready for end users particularly, so we will see a lot more end users come into the pilot towards the end of the year. So already over 108, and seemingly every day we get another request. We also have participation from the European Commission and the 3 relevant departments that are mentioned there. So next slide. Just in terms of the key activities of what we're doing, we have first of all, a requirements definition process that we understand exactly what is required. And that's coming from obviously the legislation, but it's also coming from the tax administrations themselves. We then have a work stream to develop the enterprise solution architecture. Obviously, I've outlined the 5-corner model. That's the basis. There is a lot of complication that can come into it in terms of, okay, you have an architecture, but what messages are you going to send? So things like exception handling, status messages, matching and reconciliation, these are all questions where you get into the fine detail. So we'll have a work stream to figure all that out. We then have a period of activity to develop a test environment that will be provided by OpenPeppol, and that will enable service providers and tax administrations to send specifications and receive, so that they can test that what they wanted to achieve is actually capable of being realised. And that's then done through the execution of testing, and this is where businesses will become involved as well. So that's the participation. If we go to the next slide, see the timeline. So those phases, you can see how that splits over a period starting in December last year, running up to May 26. Very likely that we will continue indefinitely as more tax administrations perhaps come on in a second wave. We are at the point where we are concluding the requirements definition process and beginning the architecture work in more detail. So we will have another workshop in June where we will finalise the architecture. Then we go through technical engineering, and then we go through testing. And that testing will begin in the 4th quarter of this year. Okay, next slide. I think it's almost there. So just a bit of a promotion. We are having a Peppol conference in June 18th and 19th. A lot more information to be found about this, and we may well have a pre-workshop conference day, pre-conference workshop day, where we will devote a good chunk of time to the ViDA pilot. So something to look out for. And that's it from me. So hopefully that leaves a little bit of time for some questions.
Steve, that was great. Thank you very much. That was a lot of information delivered very clearly. So thank you for doing that. Before I summarise, can I ask anybody that has any questions or points that they'd like to raise to post those in the chat now, please? So just to summarise, I think this starting with what Richard was talking about, I think we can see with that now approval of the package, that would be back in March now. There's a even greater momentum behind the changes that are here. Coming back to the point that I made at the start of this, the motivation around all this may, at least in part, come out of the world of tax. But I think it would be difficult to conclude from those 2 presentations there aren't quite a lot of operational changes that are about to happen to our world, and those operations and system implications are significant for all of us. I think Steve has made it clear that this isn't just in folks' imaginations, that the real work is currently underway by OpenPeppol to ensure fitness for those requirements. And lastly, just to advertise ourselves, we are committed that the electronic settlement matching standard will meet the eInvoicing requirements during this year. And one thing I would say is, having looked at those multiple corner models on several occasions. One of the things I would say about our standard is that if you get the matching right up front, then the chances of having to deal with all the error handling flows that will arise in a multi-corner model will be at least reduced. So I would ask, please consider that when considering e-invoicing. So that's my summary. I can't see any questions in the chat yet, but is there anybody who would like to raise their hand?
Either bewildered everybody or made life perfectly clear.
Could it all be the case? Richard or Steve, do you have any self-generated? If Peter McIntyre is on the call, I will nudge you in a second to talk about this question of the 10 days and of the settlement period, because that came up, and I think that's worth spending a couple of minutes talking about. So Peter, introduce yourself. You do a better job than I will.
Thank you very much. Well, yeah, I'm not sure if I want to thank you anyway, Stuart, but yeah, thanks for the opportunity of talking. I'm Peter McIntyre. I'm a senior tax manager at EDF Trading Limited. And one of the areas looking at this, it's a little bit niche, so I'm a bit reluctant to raise it, but here you go. It's around what actually a chargeable event would be. A lot of our trades are kind of wholesale gas and power trades. We tend to do monthly invoices, so most traders would do a small number of monthly invoices. In the UK, that's quite clear. We've got VAT Reg 86 that says basically the chargeable event will be when you issue the invoice. But some other countries or some other member states do not have that same thing, and it's this question about if I'm supplying a contract for electricity, which is just peak hours, and it starts for a number of days, a number of hours for each day and then stops. Is that a taxable event that would require within 10 days an invoice, or whether there is scope? One of our German colleagues says the Germans would allow a kind of a summary invoice on a monthly basis, but I'm wondering whether in different countries there might be this problem with the chargeable event. I don't know, Richard, whether you've got any ideas on that at all. Sorry, I know this is very niche to electricity and gas, but if you've got any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I think two things. I think typically where there's a continuous supply of goods, it's practically tends to be treated like continuous supply of services. So it goes to the contract. What does the contract say? So a month I've seen is typically allowed in the countries where I've come across this. And that's the first thing. I wouldn't, if your contract goes beyond a month, I think you'd have a problem with goods, so with power. It might be difficult with some of the services. So if you're providing, what would you be, certificates, carbon trading certificates, there may be more flexibility there. I think I should have mentioned this, summary invoices. This was the original plan with ViDA was to prohibit or to withdraw summary invoices, which are, as they sound, it's a single invoice which summarizes a lot of transactions. So it's done at the end of a period. They've been allowed. I'm just trying to remember what the rules are. I think you can only do one summary invoice per month per customer. And it must be submitted 10 days with month of the month end. So in our example, that would be a way to prolong the invoicing period, where we said, I think it was 15th of July, that would, if you're using summary invoices, then that would enable you to push the invoicing out to 10th of August.
Oh, right. So sorry, Richard, there will be the scope for everyone to use summary invoices if they want to, if that's a problem for them. Okay, that's wonderful.
No, good to pick me up on that. I should have mentioned that in the slides.
Okay. Yeah.
Peter, thank you very much indeed for stepping in there. I'm conscious we're now 2 minutes away from the end of the call, so I will now close off. If you have, and I'll in a second show you how to get hold of everybody for any further questions. But first of all, I'd like you all electronically please to show your appreciation for the two speakers today. Those were great presentations and lots to think over. So thank you to both Richard and to Stephen. It was very much appreciated, and I know a lot of work went into preparing for today. So how do you get hold of our organisations? If there are further questions that you'd like to ask, or points you'd like to make, or indeed that you want to get involved, to get hold of us here at NG Traders Europe, please contact us on the email address you can see on the screen now. Richard has a very impressive LinkedIn presence, and that's his address there. And Stephen has asked that for contacting him, you work with the Peppol website. Again, the details for that are shown on screen there. So with that, please do get in touch with us, and if you are part of NG Traders Europe, please get involved with the work of the operations committee on this. I think we're going to be working on this for a few years to come. So last words just to say thank you to both Richard and Stephen, and thank you to everybody for attending today. Thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah, thanks all.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye. Happy invoicing.